In the 1880s, American frontier, where dust and dreams collide, fortune favors the bold. Here begins a tale of oil, ambition, and one woman's fight for justice. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Lily Martinez wiped sweat from her brow, her calloused hands gripping the fence post. At 25, she possessed a beauty that could stop any cowboy in his tracks, yet her piercing green eyes held a determination that warned them to keep their distance. "Another day in paradise," she muttered sarcastically, watching tumbleweeds dance across the dusty ranch. Her worn leather boots kicked at the hard-packed earth as she surveyed the endless expanse of brown grass and weathered cattle. "Lily, you're dreaming again," called out old Pete, the ranch foreman, as he approached on horseback. His weathered face crinkled with concern. "Your ma's been looking for you. Says she's got news from town." Lily straightened her spine, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. "What kind of news, Pete?" The old cowboy shrugged, tobacco juice staining his grizzled beard. "The kind that makes a woman pace like a caged wildcat. Best you head to the house, girl. She's been wearing a hole in them floorboards for near an hour now." The modest ranch house creaked as Lily climbed the wooden steps, her spurs jingling softly. Through the window, she could see her mother, Maria, wringing her hands nervously. The woman's once beautiful face bore the lines of hard frontier living, but her dark eyes still sparkled with intelligence. "Mama, Pete says you've got news," Lily announced, pushing through the door. Maria turned quickly, her worn cotton dress rustling. "Mia, sit down. We need to talk about your future. And perhaps a way out of this life." Maria poured 2 cups of bitter coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "The oil fields where I work. They need someone strong, someone fearless." She paused, studying her daughter's face. "The pay is more than we could make in 5 years on this ranch, but the work," she shook her head. "It's dangerous, Lily. Working on those derricks, covered in black gold from sunrise to sunset." Lily's heart raced with excitement. "How dangerous, Mama?" Maria sighed deeply. "Men have fallen, been crushed. But you're different. You're stronger than most men I know. The question is, are you brave enough to grab fortune by the throat?" That evening, as coyotes howled in the distance, Lily paced the small parlor like a restless Mustang. The kerosene lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the adobe walls. "I'll do it, Mama," she declared, her voice cutting through the night silence. "I'll take that job on the derricks." Maria looked up from her mending, needle suspended in midair. "Child, you don't understand what you're saying. Those oil derricks stretch toward heaven like the Tower of Babel, and just as dangerous." But Lily's jaw was set with stubborn determination. "I understand perfectly. This is my chance." Maria set down her sewing with trembling hands. "The work breaks grown men, Mika. The black crude burns your skin, the fumes make you dizzy, and one wrong step." She gestured helplessly. "But Mr. Thornfield, the oil field owner, he pays fair wages." "More than fair." Lily knelt beside her mother's chair, taking the weathered hands in her own. "Then speak to him, Mama. Tell him I'm ready." Maria studied her daughter's face in the lamplight, seeing the same fierce spirit that had carried them through countless hardships. "Very well. I'll ask him tomorrow." The next morning brought a dust storm that painted the sky amber. Maria rode toward town on their old mare, while Lily attacked her ranch chores with renewed vigor. She hauled water, mended fences, and wrestled with stubborn cattle, all while imagining herself atop those towering derricks. "You're mighty cheerful for someone heading into a dust devil," old Pete observed, watching her work. "Got yourself a new bow?" Lily laughed, her voice carrying across the wind. "Better than that, Pete. I might have found my fortune." The old cowboy spat and shook his head. "Fortune's a fickle mistress, girl." As the sun began its descent, Maria returned with news that would change everything. Her face was flushed with excitement and worry. "He'll see you tomorrow at dawn," she announced breathlessly. "Mr. Thornfield wants to meet the woman brave enough to work his derricks." Lily felt her heart hammer against her ribs like a wild bronco. "What did you tell him about me?" Maria smiled despite her fears. "I told him you're stronger than most men and twice as stubborn. I told him you've never backed down from anything in your life." That night, Lily barely slept, dreams of black gold and prosperity dancing in her head. Dawn broke crimson over the oil fields as Lily approached the towering wooden derricks. The acrid smell of crude oil mixed with sulfur burned her nostrils, while the rhythmic pounding of machinery created an industrial symphony. Mr. Thornfield, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair, studied her with calculating eyes. "So you're Maria's daughter," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Your mother speaks highly of your capabilities." Lily straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to prove myself, sir." Thornfield nodded slowly. "We'll see. This is a trial period. 1 month to show you can handle the work." Within hours, Lily was coated head to toe in black crude, her muscles screaming from hauling heavy equipment up the derrick's wooden framework. Her work partner, Jake Morrison, a rugged man with kind blue eyes and weathered hands, watched her with growing admiration. "Most folks don't last past the first day," he called over the din of machinery. "You're tougher than you look, Miss Martinez." Lily wiped oil from her face, leaving streaks on her sleeve. "I didn't come this far to quit now," she shouted back. Despite the grueling conditions, she felt more alive than she had in years. As weeks passed, Lily's body adapted to the punishing work. Her hands grew calloused, her muscles hardened, and she learned to navigate the derrick's maze of ropes and pulleys with surprising grace. Jake became more than just a work partner. His gentle humor and steady presence made the long days bearable. "You know," he said one evening as they cleaned oil from their tools, "I never thought I'd meet someone who could match me drill for drill." Lily smiled, her teeth white against her oil-stained face. "Maybe that's because you never met the right woman before." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. 3 months later, Lily and Jake stood before the small frontier preacher in their Sunday best. The first clean clothes either had worn in weeks. "Do you, Jacob Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" The ceremony was simple, attended only by Maria, Old Pete, and a handful of oil workers. As they exchanged vows, the derricks continued their rhythmic pounding in the background. "I do," Jake said firmly, slipping a simple gold band onto Lily's finger. Through oil and dust, prosperity and hardship. Lily's voice was strong and clear. "I do." That night, they celebrated with Mexican guitar music and Maria's homemade tamales under a canopy of desert stars. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning, its yellow paper trembling in Jake's oil-stained hands. "Mr. Thornfield." "He's dead," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the derrick's mechanical groaning. Lily felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Dead? How?" Jake's face was pale as desert sand. "Heart attack in his sleep. The funeral's tomorrow." The news spread through the oil fields like wildfire, workers gathering in hushed groups, uncertainty clouding their weathered faces. "What happens to us now?" someone called out. Nobody had an answer. That evening, Lily and Jake sat in stunned silence, watching the sun set over their uncertain future. The following week brought an unexpected visitor. Mr. Abraham Hendricks, Thornfield's lawyer, arrived in a polished black carriage that seemed out of place among the rough oil derricks. He was a thin, nervous man who constantly adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles. "Mrs. Morrison," he addressed Lily formally, "your presence is required at the reading of Mr. Thornfield's will." Lily exchanged puzzled glances with Jake. "There must be some mistake, sir. I was just an employee." Hendricks consulted his leather portfolio. "No mistake, madam. You are specifically named in the document. The reading is tomorrow at 10 o'clock sharp." The law office was filled with an uncomfortable tension. Seated across from Lily was a man she'd never seen before, Charles Thornfield, the deceased owner's son. His expensive suit couldn't hide the telltale signs of dissipation. Bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, and the sour smell of whiskey clinging to him like a shroud. "Who is this woman?" he demanded, gesturing dismissively at Lily. "Some Mexican oil worker?" Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Charles Thornfield, may I present Mrs. Lily Morrison?" Charles sneered. "I don't care what her name is. She has no business here." The lawyer's hands shook as he opened the will. "To my daughter, Lily Martinez Morrison," Hendricks read aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I bequeath half of all my oil field holdings and properties." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "That's impossible. My father had no other children." But Hendricks continued reading. Born of my relationship with Maria Martinez, whom I loved deeply but could never marry due to social conventions of our time. Lily's world spun like a tornado. Her mother had never spoken of this. You're lying, Charles screamed, his face purple with rage. She's a nobody, a half-breed oil worker. Lily stood slowly, dignity radiating from every fiber of her being. Charles Thornfield stormed out of the lawyer's office like a man possessed, his expensive boots echoing against the wooden boardwalk. This isn't over, he shouted over his shoulder. No half-breed bastard will steal what's rightfully mine. Within days, the entire territory buzzed with news of the contested will. Charles had hired Judge Cornelius Blackwood, known throughout the county for his flexible interpretation of justice, especially when silver coins lined his pockets. He's challenging the will's validity, Hendricks warned Lily nervously. Claims your father was mentally incompetent when he wrote it. Lily's jaw tightened. My father was sharper than a Bowie knife until the day he died. The courthouse was packed with curious onlookers when the trial began. Judge Blackwood, a corpulent man with cold gray eyes, presided from his bench like a king dispensing favors. Charles's lawyer, a smooth-talking snake named Mortimer Finch, painted Lily as a scheming opportunist who had manipulated a dying man. This woman, Finch declared dramatically, used her feminine wiles to convince Mr. Thornfield that she was his long-lost daughter. Lily watched in growing horror as witness after witness took the stand, all clearly paid to lie. Even some oil workers she'd considered friends testified against her, their eyes unable to meet hers. When Lily's turn came to testify, she stood with quiet dignity despite the hostile crowd. I never knew Mr. Thornfield was my father until the day his will was read, she stated clearly. I worked honestly on his derricks for over a year. But Judge Blackwood interrupted her repeatedly, sustaining every objection from Charles's lawyer while overruling her own attorney's protests. The fix was in, and everyone in the courtroom could see it. Jake squeezed her hand as they sat back down. This ain't right, Lily, he whispered. This ain't justice. Lily's mother Maria wept silently in the gallery, her secret finally exposed to the world. The verdict came swift and brutal. I find the will to be invalid, Judge Blackwood declared, not even bothering to hide his satisfaction. Charles Thornfield is the sole legitimate heir to his father's estate. The courtroom erupted in mixed cheers and boos. Charles smirked triumphantly as his lawyer shook his hand. The very next morning, he rode to the oil fields with a gang of hired thugs. You're fired, he screamed at Lily and Jake, spittle flying from his lips. Both of you, get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing. As they gathered their few belongings, Lily felt her dreams crumbling like ancient adobe in a desert storm. A week after their crushing defeat, Lily and Jake had returned to the modest ranch house, their spirits as barren as the drought-stricken landscape. The familiar creak of the front gate announced an unexpected visitor. Mr. Hendricks approached on horseback, looking nervously over his shoulder as if fearing he was being followed. Mrs. Morrison, he called softly, dismounting with careful precision. I must speak with you privately. What I have to share, it could change everything. Lily stepped onto the porch, her heart hammering with cautious hope. What is it, Mr. Hendricks? The lawyer's eyes darted around the empty prairie before he spoke. Your father was a very wise man. Inside the small parlor, Hendricks set a heavy wooden chest on the rough-hewn table. The chest was beautifully crafted from dark oak with brass corners and an intricate lock. Mr. Thornfield gave this to me 6 months before his death, the lawyer explained, his voice barely above a whisper. He made me swear a sacred oath. If anything happened to his will, if Charles tried to steal your inheritance, I was to bring this to you immediately. Lily's hands trembled as she approached the chest. What's inside? Hendricks produced an ornate brass key from his vest pocket. Your father's insurance policy against his son's greed. The lock clicked open with a satisfying sound, and Lily gasped at what lay inside. Stacks of crisp bills filled the chest, more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Beneath the currency lay a sealed envelope marked, "For my beloved daughter Lily," in her father's distinctive handwriting. With shaking fingers, she broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. My dearest child, it began. If you are reading this, then Charles has shown his true nature. I knew this day would come. Jake peered over her shoulder as she continued reading. Your mother and I loved each other deeply, but society's rules kept us apart. You are my greatest pride. The letter continued with detailed instructions that made Lily's heart race with excitement. Enclosed, you will find enough money to purchase specific parcels of land I have marked on the accompanying map. My surveyors have discovered rich oil deposits on these properties, but I kept this information secret from everyone, including Charles. A carefully drawn map showed several locations scattered across the territory, each marked with an X and detailed coordinates. The current landowners have been approached discreetly and are willing to sell at fair prices. They await your contact. Lily looked up at Hendricks with tears in her eyes. He planned this entire rescue, didn't he? The lawyer smiled. Your father always said the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. At dawn the next morning, Lily and Jake loaded their wagon with the precious chest and set out across the rugged terrain. The map led them first to Samuel Mackenzie's ranch, 30 miles south through cactus-dotted hills and arroyos. Mackenzie, a grizzled Scotsman with a thick accent, greeted them with knowing eyes. Aye, I've been expecting ye, he said, rubbing his gray beard. Mr. Thornfield's man came by months ago, asking about this worthless patch of rocky ground. He gestured toward a seemingly barren section of his property. Said someone would come eventually with a fair offer. Didn't think it would be his daughter, though. His weathered face crinkled into a smile. This land's been nothing but trouble, Mackenzie continued, leading them across the dusty property. Cattle won't graze here. Something in the soil makes them sick. Water tastes funny, too. Got an oily film on top. He kicked at the hard-packed earth. Your father's surveyors spent weeks poking around here with their fancy equipment, taking samples and such. They paid me well for the privilege, but I never understood what they found so interesting. Jake knelt down, running the soil through his fingers. Even without digging, he could smell the faint petroleum scent. How much are you asking, Mr. Mackenzie? Lily inquired, her heart pounding with anticipation. The transaction was completed within the hour. Mackenzie seemed almost embarrassed to take their money for what he considered worthless land. $500 for 40 acres of nothing, he muttered, shaking his head as he signed the deed. Your father must have seen something I missed. By evening, they had visited 3 more properties, each transaction following the same pattern. The landowners had been contacted months earlier, agreements already negotiated in advance. It's like your father orchestrated everything from beyond the grave, Jake marveled as they camped under a canopy of desert stars. Every detail planned, every contingency covered. Lily clutched the deeds to their new properties, her father's foresight astounding her. Their final stop was Martha Fitzgerald's struggling farm, where the widow had been barely surviving since her husband's death. Oh, thank the Lord you've come, she wept when Lily introduced herself. I've been praying for months that Mr. Thornfield's people would return. This drought has ruined my crops, and I'm behind on everything. The agreed-upon price would allow Martha to start fresh elsewhere. As they signed the papers, Martha pressed a small wooden cross into Lily's hands. Your father was a good man, child. He knew this land would be worthless to me, but precious to you. That night, as they made camp on their newest acquisition, Jake pointed to the map. According to this, we now own 5 separate oil fields. Your father just made us the richest couple in the territory. 3 months later, the first gusher erupted from Mackenzie's former property with a thunderous roar that shook the earth for miles. Black gold shot 50 feet into the air, raining down like liquid prosperity. Jake, look at it! Lily shouted over the deafening sound, her face streaked with oil and tears of joy. Workers scrambled to contain the flow as money literally poured from the ground. Within days, all 5 properties were producing oil beyond their wildest dreams. We're rich, Lily, Jake whispered in amazement. Richer than kings. News of their oil strike spread across the territory like wildfire. Businessmen arrived daily with contracts and proposals, while Charles Thornfield watched from afar, his face twisted with rage and envy. How did they find oil when my father's surveys showed nothing? He demanded of his lawyer. Meanwhile, Lily and Jake established their headquarters in a newly built office, hiring honest workers and paying fair wages. We'll do business the right way, Lily declared. No corruption, no bribes, just honest work for honest pay. Their reputation grew as quickly as their fortune. As winter approached, Lily discovered she was carrying their first child. The news filled their modest home with laughter and hope for the future. "A baby," Jake marveled, placing his hand gently on her growing belly. "Our child will grow up with opportunities we never dreamed of." They moved into a beautiful new house overlooking their oil empire, its windows offering a view of the derricks that had changed their lives. Maria, now a proud grandmother-to-be, helped prepare the nursery. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered to Lily. Meanwhile, Charles continued his descent into gambling and drinking, squandering what remained of his inheritance on poker tables and saloon girls. "The Martinez woman has stolen my birthright," he ranted to anyone who would listen. But fewer people paid attention now. Success had made Lily respectable, while failure had made Charles pathetic. Each night, Lily and Jake stood on their porch, watching the steady flames from their derricks paint the sky orange. "From ranch girl to oil baroness," Jake mused. "Your father's gift keeps giving." Their empire grew stronger with each passing day. One fateful evening in the Silver Dollar Saloon, Charles sat across from notorious gambler Blackjack Murphy, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the cards. The pot contained his last 3 oil derricks, everything that remained of his father's empire. "I call," Charles slurred, laying down his hand. Murphy's ace-high straight crushed Charles's pair of queens. "Looks like these oil fields are mine now," Murphy laughed, gathering the deeds. Charles stumbled into the night, his inheritance completely gone. Murphy had no idea he'd just won a fortune in black gold from a drunken fool. News of Charles's gambling loss reached Lily within days. She rode to the Silver Dollar and found Murphy drinking whiskey at the bar. "Mr. Murphy, I understand you won some oil properties in a poker game," she said calmly. Murphy squinted at her suspiciously. "What's it to you, lady?" Lily placed a leather satchel on the bar. "I'll pay you $5,000 cash for those deeds right now." Murphy's eyes widened. It was more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. "Deal," he said quickly, not knowing he'd just sold oil fields worth 50 times that amount. That night, Charles discovered what Lily had done and flew into a murderous rage. "She's stolen everything from me," he screamed, smashing bottles against the saloon wall. "I'll burn her empire to the ground." Under cover of darkness, he rode to Lily's oil fields with a wagon full of kerosene and matches. 3 derricks burst into flames before night watchman Tom Bradley spotted him. "Fire! Charles Thornfield's burning the oil wells," Bradley shouted, his voice carrying across the desert. Workers rushed to fight the blaze while Charles fled into the night, his crime witnessed by a dozen men. When the corrupt local sheriff refused to arrest Charles, claiming insufficient evidence, Lily took matters into her own hands. She sent telegrams to federal marshals in Austin, detailing the arson and the corruption that had plagued their county. "This ends now," she declared to Jake as they watched investigators arrive. Federal Marshal William Hayes, a steel-eyed man with an impeccable reputation, interviewed witnesses and gathered evidence. "Mrs. Morrison will ensure justice is served," he promised. Within days, warrants were issued for both Charles and Judge Blackwood. The corrupt system was finally crumbling. The federal trial was swift and decisive. Marshal Hayes presented overwhelming evidence of Charles's arson and Judge Blackwood's corruption. The defendant was witnessed setting fire to multiple oil derricks, the prosecutor declared. This was a deliberate act of destruction born from greed and spite. Charles, now sober and terrified, pleaded desperately. "She stole my inheritance. That oil should be mine." But the judge, an honest man from Austin, showed no mercy. 5 years hard labor for arson, he sentenced. Judge Blackwood received 10 years for corruption. Justice had finally come to the frontier. 1 year later, Lily stood atop her tallest derrick, her infant son Thomas cradled in her arms. The boy had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. "Look at your kingdom, little prince," she whispered, gesturing toward the dozens of oil wells stretching to the horizon. Jake climbed up beside them, his face glowing with pride and happiness. "Hard to believe we started with nothing but dreams and determination," he mused. Their empire now employed over 200 workers, all paid fair wages and treated with respect. The Morrison Oil Company had become the most prosperous and ethical business in the territory. Lily had built schools for workers' children, a medical clinic, and decent housing for all employees. Wealth without conscience is worthless, she often said, remembering her father's letter. Maria, now a beloved grandmother, helped run the company's charitable programs. "You've honored your father's memory," she told Lily one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the oil fields gold. "You've proven that goodness and success can walk hand in hand on this wild frontier." As Thomas took his first steps across the polished floors of their mansion, Lily reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From a dusty ranch girl with impossible dreams to the most powerful woman in the territory, it seemed like a fairy tale. But the oil-stained hands and weathered faces of her workers reminded her that success meant nothing without purpose. "We've tamed more than just the frontier," Jake observed, watching their son play. "We've proven that justice and righteousness can triumph over corruption and greed." The American dream lived on in the desert sunset,